We have seen a couple of deals that aren't going to be happening at this stage. Do you think there are a growing number of hurdles standing in the way of M&A activity?
Stephen, good afternoon. There's always hurdles. Deal making is a notoriously difficult game. Regulatory restrictions are always problematic. It's never quite so mechanical or formula driven. There's a lot of qualitative issues to consider. Many stakeholders indeed need to be brought into the discussion. If we think through the history of deals that have failed, mainly they failed because of competition sort of issues, a failure to get governments on board. You think of the MT and Barty deal, for instance. You look at capital requirements, potentially that's rumoured that could be the reason why HSBC backed away from Nedbank. It is always a difficult issue to fathom through, figure out in advance, and actually put steps in place, always.
Paulina, very good afternoon to you. What is your view on the merger and acquisition activity on a global level? It seems that one of the things that have been affecting some of these deals going through is a lack of confidence and perhaps a deterioration of confidence over the last few months.
Yes, hello. Very good afternoon, actually, for you. Still good morning for me. Our views, I would say this, I think in M&A activity, of course, most transactions that are always negotiated actually don't happen. Most of them don't. But still, I think in terms of global M&A activity, we see a slight increase. But Africa, I'm actually particularly optimistic about deals, transactions happening there. And although, yes, fair enough, Nedbank might not be happening, but in South Africa especially, we've seen a lot of investors' interest, and I think this is proven by the recent acquisition of Massmart by Walmart. I think it's a big deal, again, underlying what we've seen over the past few months, that there's a lot of interest in sort of consumer-related industries in Africa from external investors, them going to Africa and looking for new sources of profit. So for these reasons, I think we're optimistic that the levels of M&A activity will be increasing and actually big transactions will be happening. And we still hope to see some in banking, definitely. This is for South Africa as well as other sub-Saharan countries, because there is still a lot of scope, definitely, for banking consolidation there.
Well, of course, Mark, Paulina did highlight that Walmart Massmart deal, and we know they've at least put a price on the table, which we didn't have with HSBC and Nedbank. But again, this is another deal that could face some hurdles. We've had the unions already crying out against this, and I'm not quite sure whether the regulators would step in. But it's not going to be plain sailing, is it?
No, it isn't. It's always hard to know what the intention of the acquiring company is. I mean, it's clearly understandable why unions will focus on, well, job cuts and what's the extent of that going to be. But deals like this, of this scale, are not done for just the hygienic reasons of reducing costs. They're done for strategic reasons, for growth across the territory, using perhaps South Africa as a platform for expansion into what is one of the most exciting territories in the world, which is the African space, where there is growth, where, let's face it, capital chases growth, and that's where it's happening right now.
And exactly, so the growth is happening on the African continent,
absolutely.
So it's all about that going forward. I mean, Paulina was also highlighting the fact that Africa perhaps being one of those big targets, even though we have seen some M&A deals falling through on a global level, perhaps we'll start seeing more deals of this kind, bigger deals happening on the African continent.
And Africa is becoming a battleground. You know, the Chinese capital is moving into this continent and it's picking up pace, but so is the American capital and the European capital. And watch the space for more South American capital. We're seeing a lot more Brazilian organizations looking at assets in Africa. It's becoming a battleground for the future. And it's a great place to be for that reason. Yeah.
Well, Paulina, you talked about more deals in Africa in the consumer space, and of course we do know there's been a shake-up in the Nigerian banking sector, with lots of banks around the world looking at that sector. I mean, do you envisage similar regulatory problems perhaps as banks try to enter the Nigerian space?
I think Nigeria is in a different situation than South Africa, and we're looking here at two situations. First of all, I think that in Nigeria there is sort of a need for growth there, and a lot of groups, international groups, are looking. However, we've seen banks fail there, and this is the situation that we're observing also in Europe, in Greece and in Ireland. And we know that these situations can take a very, very long while to resolve and see who could be buyers, if there will be buyers for any distressed banks, because obviously those are the obvious M&A targets. However, not all banks fail there, and you also have attractive targets that could come up for sale. And I'm hearing when talking to sources on the situation that there is a lot of interest in Nigeria, definitely. And when we were talking to governors, to the governor and people working in Nigeria, looking at how to resolve the situation with banks, they're underlying that they really, really want international investors, that there shouldn't be any problems, especially if international investor is another bank, which could help the sector to lift up, and where this M&A activity can bring external capital. It's difficult to say if there won't be any, because yet there still remain to be seen how the situation goes further. But I think that because the sector needs more capital there, especially on the distressed side, we would expect a sort of less legal hurdles on this aspect.
Well, Mark, where do you suspect the most activity will be occurring? And I mean, we know in the banking space, as Stephen and Paulina were discussing now, Nigeria being one of those lucrative spaces, the telecom space has been under the spotlight. We know Bharti and Zain teamed up as well. And then also looking at the consumer space, Walmart and Massmart. And it seems that South Africa is the preferred entry point at this point in time as well.
In many respects, South Africa is seen as like the Hong Kong of Africa. It's seen as the platform. It's got the legal, the regulatory systems that are most attractive to foreign investors. It's something that, for many of them, it's familiar territory, and it's proven and established as in terms of its ongoing application. I think what's interesting to me is that Africa in the past was always known as like the one-trick pony. It was all about just oil, you know, and natural resources and gold and diamonds, but it's not anymore. Consumerism is a huge factor in a massive population across the continent. And Africa, by the way, is seen by investors as terra firma, one place. Okay, so, you know, well north of 1 billion people, all starting to grow to degrees disposable income, and they're buying cell phones, they're buying cars, they're buying produce from retailers. So it's no longer the one-trick pony. It's very much a diversified investment opportunity.
Mark, how about the rand? Because we've seen the rand strengthening quite significantly over the past couple of months, and even since HSBC still made its overtures to Nedbank. Do you think this could be a detractor to deals, because you're paying significantly more for South African assets with the rand at current levels? Do you think that could have been one of the reasons why HSBC decided to walk away?
I wouldn't say in the case of the HSBC deal it was a factor. You know, large-scale investors of the multi-billion-dollar type are in for the long term. You know, rand strength right now, in the scheme of things, is unlikely to be maintained, you know, for the long term. Short term right now, it is looking expensive, but I don't think that detracts long-term strategic investors at all.
Paulina, your view on this, the strong rand, and if it will be a deterrent to investors, and also your view on South Africa as an entry point into the rest of the continent. Do you think investors are looking more north of South Africa at this point for some of those really important opportunities, and of course for some of the companies that perhaps are offering better value than South African assets?
Yeah, actually, I will start maybe from the second part of your question. And absolutely, yes. I think that South Africa, a lot of people are treating at least South Africa as a platform to grow in Sub-Saharan Africa. But we have to remember also that Sub-Saharan Africa is the Francophone Africa, it's English-speaking Africa with different cultures, with different still political regimes. I think what's interesting right now from our perspective in terms of M&A is what you have just said a while ago, that it's not only about natural resources anymore. It's about these consumer-related industries, and especially with those, I think we see that people are looking for growth in Sub-Saharan Africa through sort of first steps South Africa, and then moving further up north. In terms of the strong rand, it's an interesting issue, definitely. But still, I would say just this. Walmart is happening, so I think even a lot of people are thinking that Walmart is overpaying for this transaction. It is still happening. So it means that the underlying need for getting to the continent might be the most important thing here.
Mark, a quick one just before we go. Do you think we are going to see more M&A deals? We do know that companies are sitting with lots of capital on the balance sheet. They have to deploy that to get returns for shareholders. Are we still going to see growth in the M&A space despite a few failed deals?
I think empirically, because of the amount of shored up capital around the world, there is pent-up demand. That capital has to go somewhere. It's not going to go to the US. We're facing potentially a double-dip recession. Europe is still in a state of disarray. There's plenty of capital been deployed to the Far East and South America. So, the money has to come here. There is just no way it can sit where it currently is. So I think we're going to see a lot more M&A activity.